What is up, guys and gals? Welcome back to another chess video. This is me, JK Jax, back at it again. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to play the King's Indian Defense. Some common mistakes that I see people play when they play the King's Indian Defense. So, of course, the King's Indian Defense is a very universal opening, except e4. You can play it even against the English opening, right? So I'm going to be showing you what to do against d4 and what to play against c4. So let's start. So d4, knight f6, and doesn't really matter what they play, if they go for the London system, if they go for the Jobava London, if they go for the classic c4, you're going to go for the King's Indian system. Well, basically, you want to put your bishop on g7. Let's say e3, bishop g7, c3, castles, bishop d3, then you play d6. Now this pawn on d6, I'm going to be explaining to you later on why is it so useful. Now, this is the first step of the King's Indian defense, to get this structure in the first place. What is the role of each piece? Right, so the knight here is trying to control the center. At some point, it's going to open itself up and this bishop will become a freaking monster. This is one of the most important pawns in the King's Indian defense. What you're doing with it is to try to strike the center with e5. Now notice that we haven't committed any pawns in the center just yet. Well, King's Indian defense is a hyper-modern opening. A hyper-modern opening is an opening that has this mindset of saying like, I can control the center without actually putting my pawns in the center. So that is the idea of the King's Indian defense, to attack your opponent's center. So we're going to play d6, we're going to play knight c6, knight d2, or castles for example, and then we're going to play this key move e5. Right, so but we're not going to play e5 now. At this point, don't play e5 just yet. Here, I want you to make another preparatory move, queen to e8. Then, e5 will come with stronger effect. So, this will just be a short theory on how to play this specific London system. But if they, instead of castling, they play knight to d2, here, because the queen is disconnected from the defense of the bishop, immediately play the move e5. Here white cannot take this pawn, right? If they take, you take back, and now this dark square bishop is hit, as well as this bishop on d3. And here, white is losing. But what are you actually going to do with this pawn? Well, nothing. Just you have taken your claim in the center, right? In the London system, the point of the opening is to control e4 and e5. And if white controls these two squares, black has no counterplay. However, you've won the battle for e5. Means white's plan is doomed. His plan failed. So it's going to be great for you, right? So this is just basically how you play against the London system. But if you want to dive in deeper on how to play against the London system, feel free to use an engine, or maybe in the future I'll make a video, a more detailed video on how you can actually play against the London system using the King's Indian defense. But let's get back. What if instead of bishop f4, or even the Jobava London, which I might make a video on how to play the Jobava London using the King's Indian defense, we're going to talk about the main line, c4. Just go for your King's Indian structure once again. Bishop g7, knight c3, castles, and then e4. Every single time when you see the move e4, you have to play d6. The move d6 prevents e5. Let's see in this case, your opponent plays e5. Against that, you can take, trade the queens first, and then your knight jumps to g4, opening up this dark square bishop and attacking the pawn. So now you have two attackers on that one pawn with just one move. Right, you're killing two stones with one bird. Now the dark square bishop defends the pawn, but then you have this little horsey here that can add a third attacker on that pawn. And here, black is just winning a pawn. And black is very happy. He has control of the center. He has control of everything. So of course this is why we play d6, and d6 not only stops e5 but also enables yourself to go to e5 and take your claim in the center. Now, the first thing that many people get wrong in the King's Indian defense is not taking their claim in the center. They think that King's Indian is an all-out attack on one side, but what they don't realize is that the center is usually closed down first before they do that all-out kingside attack, right? Usually if you want to attack on the wings or you want to launch an all-out kingside attack, your center needs to be closed and your king should not be in harm's way, which this is what the King's Indian defense accomplishes, right? Safeguarding your king and then closing the center. We're not trying to ruin white's center. We're actually trying to close down the battle for the center. Okay? So this is what you need to remember. Stake your claim in the center, close it down, then you go for the kingside attack. Okay? So that will be it. Why does my voice sound so hoarse? Anyways, let's take it back. And now of course, your opponent has many ways to play. But honestly, against any move your opponent plays, you just go e5, right? Bishop e2, e5, or even bishop e3. You can also go e5. And again, if they take, and maybe some people even choose to trade queens, there is this little tactic that you need to remember, okay? What happens if the opponent plays knight takes e5? Well, this seemingly looks like white wins a pawn, but you actually can win that pawn back by sacrificing the knight on e4. This is a free brilliant move for you, right? And so after the knight takes back, then you can take this knight on e5 and you have equalized the material, but not only that, your dark square bishop is actually very, very strong. This pawn on b2 is under attack, this rook is on an open file and preventing white from castling, and development is actually very easy for you. You can play your knight to c6, you plant your bishop to e5, you plant your bishop to f5, and you can even double your rooks on d8, and black is enjoying a very good game of chess. And there are some people who sacrifice the knight first, sort of a desperado tactic, right? If you take the knight, then the opponent will take your knight, and he'll be happy. Except, there's an in-between move. Bishop takes c3 check. And after that, you win material. And now you're just up a piece. So that's all you need to know in this variation. This is why you can play e5. And of course your plan will be as follows. Here you can play a5. Right, so why you want to play a5? Well, there's this one drawback with playing the move pawn to d5. And that is the fact that the c5 square is very, very weak. And how do you take advantage of that? Is by putting a piece on that c5 square. If the knight was on c5, look at how much space and control you have over the center. Right, this pawn on e4 is hit, you have control over the d3 square, and now this light square bishop is basically stuck. Right, now this light square bishop is in a jail cell. But if you want your knight to be there, you need to first prevent b4, because if they play b4, then your knight gets kicked. So you play a5 first. Let's say your opponent develops. Now you play your knight to a6, and then you plant your knight on c5. And here, black has a very comfortable position. Your next plan are as follows. You're actually going to slide that knight back, and maybe even start that kingside attack. So we're going to come back to the main line, which is bishop e2. Again, we play e5, and once again, even if they play d5 here, this is known as the Petrosian Variation, of course named after the legendary player. What Petrosian aims to do is to achieve stability with d5 and prevent the knight from going to c6. If the knight gets to c6, then you're going to see that classic King's Indian kingside attack, which is very, very dangerous. The downside is once again that weakness on c5, so you actually just play the same thing, okay? And plan will be as normal lah, it's the same thing. But when should you not play e5? Well, you shouldn't strike with e5 when the opponent chooses to fianchetto his bishop on g2. Why? Let's say if the opponent plays g3 and goes for a Catalan structure. You castle, bishop g2, d6, and they castle. So why should you not strike with e5? Well, I mean, first of all, if you strike e5 here, you just lose a pawn. Secondly, is that with the bishop fianchettled on g2, the king has now an extra layer of defense against the king. So if you were to go for that same kingside attack, it is not going to work. So now, because the kingside is super safe, you should shift your attention over to the queenside. Then here you can just strike with c5. Of course, not once again, you're not afraid if they take that pawn. Right, here is actually much better for you. You have a open rook. What you plan to do in the future is, of course, play moves like knight e4, play moves like knight c6, and maybe even strike on the queen side, or even the center. All is good here. Check a little bit more with the engine to see how you carry out these attacks. So we're gonna go back. You're gonna most likely see d5, and against d5, you have to play for the Benoni structure. What is the Benoni? Then if you see d5 here, you have to play for the Benoni game plan. You can play this a bit like a Benoni. You play e6 to first undermine that center, and then you're gonna play a6 and b5. The easiest way to play is first you can play the move rook to e8, okay, and after that you play e6, and of course if they take, you get a very active bishop. Now if they just make any other move, let's say bishop to g5, here you can choose to take in the center first. Some people will choose to take with a knight, of course. Here if they take with a knight, solidify your knight, and then in the future you're gonna kick out that bishop. But if they take with a pawn, you kick out the bishop, and if the bishop were to go back, then now you can play the move bishop to f5. Your bishop is very active. Your knight will eventually go to a6. You can push that pawn to c4 and then plant your knight very nice and snugly on that c5 square. And of course advance on the queen side, right? a6, b5, b4, all out attack, right? So you notice that in a lot of these positions, we always take our claim in the center first. We control space before we commit to any sort of flank attacks. So this is one case of when you should not strike with e5 against a fianchettled system in the d4 opening. And another case for you to not strike in e5 is in the English opening. So we're going to go back all the way to the starting position. If white were to play 1c4, they have to play something like knight c3. Some people choose to play g3 here. Same thing, we're going to play g6, right? Bishop g2, bishop g7, knight f3, blah blah blah. Here, you're going to castle first. Most likely, you're going to see knight f3. You can play d6, castles, and see it just turns back into another fianchettled opening, right? Any fianchettled opening, you just play c5. So that's all you need to remember. Strike e5 if your opponent does not have a fianchettled bishop. The second tip is do not let your dark square bishop get traded at all costs. So we're going to take back to another position. Let's say if you were to play e5, your opponent goes d5, you go knight e6, your opponent goes queen d2. So what does your opponent try to achieve with this move? To trade away this dark square bishop, right? And if they do eventually trade this dark square bishop, you can play knight to g4 and then eventually trade it for this dark square bishop. Anything to prevent that dark square bishop from getting traded, because this piece can be a defensive and offensive piece. Even if that rook is hanging in the corner, if it's defended by something, many times, like 90% of the times, this bishop for that rook is actually a bad trade. But if that rook is just hanging by itself, of course take the free material lah, right? That'll be pretty much it. Tips and tricks on how to play the King's Indian better, right? I hope you guys had a more broad understanding of the King's Indian. Hope to see you get some beautiful wins in the King's Indian defense. See you guys in the next one. Goodbye.